Unity events, it's a very powerful and nice tool to have. And today we're going to talk a little bit about it. So we've got this little scene over here. And in a previous tutorial, we made a system where if we pick up this key, it goes through this array and deletes all of the game objects in this array. But what if instead of always destroying an array of objects, maybe sometimes when we pick up a key, we want to create an object. For instance, creating a bridge or something like that. Do we need to make a whole separate key, a whole separate script that does everything exactly the same except what happens when we run into it? Well, for something as simple as a key, that probably doesn't matter that much. But if you've got a much more complex script with a lot of different things going on, it's not particularly a good idea to make a duplicate of that just for one tiny difference. Because if you then need to change something about that existing code, you suddenly need to change it in two places. And as far as coding goes, the rule of thumb is always, if there's a way to not have to duplicate your code, you take that way. So instead what we're going to do here is we're going to change this into a Unity event. And a Unity event is something where we can run a specific function from any object in our scene, and which object and which function that is can be chosen on a case-by-case basis. So instead of using a game object array for the doors here, what we can do is we can delete this, and instead we can put in a public Unity event, and we call that something like on pickup, because in the end that's what we're doing, we're picking up the key. And then we can just kind of run that like a function in any of our code. So we have our onTrigger enter 2D here, and in that we used to run the delete doors function. What we can do instead is we can just say our onPickup dot invoke, and now it will run any code that we put into this event inside of the Unity editor on an instance by instance basis. So let's go to our door script real quick here, and let's make a public function that will delete the door. That'll just destroy this game object. And now when we go to this key, we see a onPickup event in which we can add things that need to happen. So we can still just go through and say in our grid here we have these doors. We can still say for each one of these doors we can just drag them in here and create the function for delete door on every single one of these. And functionally, ignore the UI, we did that in the last episode, this will still do the same thing, right? But the huge upside here is that we can make a second key, which we can just drag in through here, put that on the other side of the door, and we can put different code on this version of the key. So we can put in a key that we can pick up, and maybe this key increases our score, right? So we have a score counter here, which is this object. So we can drag in our TextMesh Pro, and instead we can go to our score counter and increase our score by 5 when we pick up this key. Now, this is the same object for all intents and purposes. It's just running different codes on its event being triggered. So this one doesn't increase my score, but it deletes the 3 doors that we have. And then when I pick up this one, we see that my score increases by 5. So where we can make a game object that exists out of multiple components and have a very modular system in that, events allow us to do that one step deeper with specific code that needs to be executed. So we can have the same components run different code on a per instance basis. This makes designing your levels a lot smoother because you don't have to make references in every single script to every single other script of every potentiality that it could influence. You just make an event, and instead of putting the code for deleting the doors on the key, you let the key alone. You keep that very, very minimal, and you put the code for deleting the doors on the doors themselves. Then that event on the key can reference maybe that door, maybe a score counter, maybe a bridge that needs to be created. Maybe it can trigger a enemy spawner, and when you pick up a key, it can spawn enemies. It can do all these things in a row. It can delete a door, lower a bridge, and spawn enemies. And you are, as a designer, very free to quickly add in functionality to a specific instance of a specific object in your game world. And a very big thank you to all of my Patreons. You can see them on screen right now. If you want to help out supporting the channel, there's a link down below in the description to the Patreon page.